The resignation letter was still warm from the printer when Daniel Mercer placed it on his manager's desk. "I'm done." His manager stared at the paper. "You understand what you're giving up?" Daniel looked through the glass wall toward the office floor, where dozens of employees were still working beneath the cold white lights. "I understand exactly what I'm giving up." Then he walked away. By 6 that evening, his employee badge was deactivated. By 7, his phone had stopped receiving company emails. And by 8:30, Daniel was sitting alone at his small kitchen table, staring at a grocery receipt while his 9-year-old son, Noah, quietly finished his homework across from him. Daniel folded the receipt once. Then again. He had $37 left until Friday. Noah looked up. "Dad." Daniel forced his eyes away from the numbers. "Yeah. Are we okay?" The question landed harder than any angry phone call could have. Daniel looked at his son's backpack beside the chair. One zipper was broken. The corners of his math workbook were bent. On the refrigerator, held by a cheap magnet, was a photograph of Noah at his school science fair, grinning beside a cardboard rocket. Daniel had spent 8 years making sure his son never had to wonder whether they were okay. Tonight, he had no answer. He reached across the table and squeezed Noah's shoulder. "We're going to be fine." Noah studied his face. "You promise?" Daniel nodded. "I promise." But after Noah went upstairs, Daniel remained at the kitchen table. The house was silent. He opened his banking app again. $37. Then he heard 3 slow knocks at the front door. Daniel frowned. Nobody visited them this late. He checked the clock. 9:14 p.m. Another knock. He walked toward the door, expecting a neighbor. Instead, when he opened it, he stopped breathing. Standing beneath the porch light was Victoria Hale, his CEO. She wasn't wearing the tailored suits he was used to seeing in the executive offices. She wore a dark coat, simple shoes, and an expression Daniel had never seen on her face before. Uncertainty. She looked past him toward the quiet house. Then back at him. "Daniel," she said softly, "I need you to come back." Daniel almost laughed. "You drove across town to tell me that?" "No." She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin black folder. "I came because your resignation exposed something I didn't know existed." Daniel's expression changed. "What are you talking about?" Victoria held the folder tighter. "Someone has been destroying my company from the inside." She paused. "And you're the only person I trust to help me stop it." Daniel stared at her. Then he looked down at the folder. "What does that have to do with me?" Victoria's voice dropped. "Everything." 3 days earlier, Daniel had been sitting in a conference room on the 32nd floor of Hale Meridian, watching 6 executives argue over a multi-million-dollar project. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was a senior operations analyst, not an executive. But Daniel had spent 11 years learning how the company actually worked. He knew which warehouses were understaffed, which vendors delivered late, which contracts looked profitable on paper but quietly drained money. And he had a habit that irritated almost everyone above him. He checked the numbers twice. That morning, he had found something strange. A transportation contract had been approved for $4.8 million. The vendor was legitimate. The paperwork was perfect. The signatures were authentic. But one line bothered him. The payment schedule. Daniel had followed the money through 3 internal reports. Then 4. At the end of the trail was a private consulting firm nobody in operations had heard of. He printed the documents. That was when his department director, Richard Cole, walked into his office. Richard shut the door behind him. "You've been digging." Daniel looked at the papers. "I've been doing my job." "No," Richard said. "You've been looking where you're not supposed to look." Daniel leaned back. "If the numbers are wrong, someone needs to know." Richard stared at him for several seconds. Then he smiled. "You have a son, right?" Daniel's fingers stopped moving. Richard noticed. "Relax. I'm not threatening you." He stepped closer. "I'm reminding you that life gets complicated when you make powerful people uncomfortable." Daniel didn't answer. Richard picked up the documents. "Forget this." Daniel reached for them. "Those are company records." Richard placed them on the desk. "Then act like an employee." That sentence stayed with Daniel all afternoon. At 5:40, he received another message. A school reminder. Noah's father-teacher meeting was scheduled for the following morning. Daniel had forgotten. He had missed the last 2. He looked at the meeting notification, then at the financial reports on his monitor. For years, he'd told himself he was working this hard for Noah. But suddenly, he couldn't remember the last time Noah had asked him to come to something and Daniel had actually been there. At 6:15, Daniel walked into Victoria Hale's office. She was standing near the windows, reviewing a presentation. She turned. Daniel. He placed an envelope on her desk. My resignation. Victoria didn't touch it. What happened? Nothing. That isn't true. Daniel looked at her. You're the CEO? You have bigger problems. Victoria stepped around the desk. If something is wrong, tell me. Daniel almost did. He almost handed her the documents. But then he remembered Richard's warning. He thought about Noah. And he thought about the life he'd already sacrificed to keep his job. I just need to leave, he said. Victoria studied him. You've worked here 11 years. I know. You turned down 2 promotions. I know. You've never taken a sick day unless you were actually sick. Daniel gave a tired smile. I don't think any of that matters anymore. Victoria looked at the resignation letter. Then at him. Does this have something to do with Richard? Daniel's face gave away just enough. Victoria noticed. But before she could ask another question, Daniel walked out. Now, 3 nights later, Victoria stood at his front door with a folder in her hands. Daniel let her inside. They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Daniel had counted his last $37. Victoria opened the folder. Inside were copies of transactions Daniel had never seen. Different vendors, different departments, different dates, but the same hidden destination. Millions of dollars had been moved through small contracts over nearly 3 years. Victoria looked at him. You found the pattern. Daniel scanned the pages. His stomach tightened. The consulting company. Victoria nodded. I thought it was a procurement problem. She turned another page. It isn't. Daniel looked closer. A list of employee approvals appeared beneath the transactions. Several names were familiar. Then he saw one that wasn't. His own. Daniel frowned. I never approved these. I know. Then why is my name here? Victoria didn't answer immediately. That silence frightened him more than the documents. Finally, she said, because someone has been building a record that makes you look responsible. Daniel pushed the papers away. So I'm the fall guy. That's what I believe. Daniel stood. Then call the police. I already called our attorneys. And they told me to be careful. Daniel stared at her. Victoria lowered her voice. 2 weeks ago, our head of internal security disappeared. Daniel froze. What? He resigned. Why? I don't know. And you still kept operating? Victoria's jaw tightened. I didn't know who I could trust. Daniel looked at the folder again. Something clicked. That's why you came here. Victoria nodded. You resigned before they could frame you completely. Daniel looked toward the stairs. My son is upstairs. I know. You came to my house because you think I'm going to risk his safety. Victoria immediately shook her head. No. She closed the folder. I came because I'm offering you something that can protect both of you. Daniel waited. Victoria slid a single sheet across the table. Daniel read it. Then read it again. His expression changed. You're offering me a position? Not an employee position. Daniel looked up. Victoria held his gaze. Chief of Special Operations. He almost smiled. I don't know what that means. It means you report directly to me. You work outside the normal chain of command. You get access to every financial system, every contract, every internal investigation. Daniel stared at the number on the offer. The salary was nearly 4 times what he'd been making. His chair moved backward as he sat down. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. Daniel looked at the signature line. Then at Victoria. What happens if I say no? Victoria's expression softened. Then I leave. Daniel blinked. You drove here just to offer me a job? No. She closed the folder. I drove here because I finally understood why you quit. Daniel said nothing. Victoria continued. You weren't running from work. Her eyes moved toward the staircase. You were running back to your son. Daniel's throat tightened. Victoria stood. I won't ask you to choose between your family and your career again. She walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Daniel looked at her. Victoria turned around. Richard Cole knows about this offer. Daniel's face hardened. How? Because someone inside my office is still watching me. She opened the door. Think about it. Then she left. Daniel stood in the doorway long after her car disappeared down the street. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Noah appeared at the top of the stairs wearing pajamas. Dad. Daniel turned. Yeah. Who was that? Daniel looked at the empty street. Someone from work. Noah descended the stairs. Are you going back? Daniel looked at his son. He wanted to say no. Instead, he said, I don't know. The next morning, Daniel attended Noah's school meeting. For the first time in months, He sat in a small classroom beneath colorful posters and listened while Noah's teacher explained his science project. Noah kept glancing at him, as if checking whether his father was really there. Daniel noticed, and that look made his decision. He returned home that afternoon and called Victoria. "I'll take the job." Victoria was silent for a moment. Then she said, "I need you to understand something." "What?" "If you take this position, you can't trust everyone around me." Daniel looked at the front window. "Then I'll start with you." There was a pause. "Fair enough," Victoria said. The investigation began that night. Daniel worked from a private office Victoria gave him, but he refused to move into the executive floor. He wanted no audience, no attention, just access. He reconstructed 3 years of transactions. Then he noticed something strange. Every suspicious payment occurred within 48 hours of a particular type of executive meeting. Not board meetings, not financial meetings, personnel meetings. Someone was using staffing decisions to hide financial movements. Daniel printed the meeting calendars. Then he found a repeated name, Evan Hale, Victoria's younger brother. Daniel stared at the page. He called Victoria. She answered immediately. "What did you find?" "Your brother." Silence. "Say that again." Evan's name appears beside 7 of the transactions. Victoria didn't respond. Daniel could hear her breathing. Finally, she said, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. When she arrived, Daniel had already arranged the documents across the table. Victoria walked in, saw the papers, and stopped. "My brother doesn't handle finances." "I know. He hates numbers." "I know." "Then why is his name here?" Daniel pointed to one document. "He's not moving the money." Victoria leaned closer. "He's authorizing personnel changes." Daniel nodded. "And every time he removes someone from a sensitive position, money disappears within 2 days." Victoria sat down. For the first time since Daniel had known her, she looked lost. "My brother?" Daniel said nothing. Victoria pressed her fingers against her forehead. "I raised him after our father died." Daniel watched her. "He was 20. I was 24. She looked at the documents. "I gave him a job when nobody else would." Daniel quietly said, "That doesn't mean you know him." Victoria looked up. The sentence hurt, but she knew it was true. Then Daniel noticed another detail. A signature. Not Evan's. Someone else's. He pulled the document closer. "This isn't him." Victoria stood. "What?" Daniel pointed. "Evan authorized the staffing change, but someone else approved the payment." He circled the name. Victoria's face went pale. It belonged to her chief financial officer, Marcus Reed, the man who had spent 20 years building the company's finances. The man Victoria trusted more than anyone. Daniel leaned back. "Your brother may be involved." Victoria stared at the name. "But Marcus is the one moving the money." That changed everything. They found Evan that evening in an empty parking structure beneath the corporate tower. Victoria approached him alone. Daniel watched from a distance. Evan looked exhausted. He didn't run. He didn't deny anything. He simply said, "You finally figured it out." Victoria's face hardened. "How long?" 3 years. "Why?" Evan looked away. "Because Marcus threatened to destroy you." Victoria froze. Evan explained. Marcus had discovered financial irregularities years earlier and used them to blackmail Evan. If Evan refused to cooperate, Marcus would expose fabricated evidence suggesting Victoria had approved illegal transfers. Evan had helped remove employees who were getting too close. But he hadn't known how much money Marcus was stealing. When he finally discovered the truth, he tried to stop him. Marcus threatened him again. Then Evan made one mistake. He reached out to Daniel. Not directly. Through an anonymous internal message. The message Daniel received weeks earlier, the one that had made him investigate the contract, had come from Evan. Victoria looked at her brother. "You could have told me. I tried. You never tried hard enough." Evan's eyes filled. "I was scared." Victoria looked away. She couldn't forgive him yet, but she couldn't abandon him either. Then Daniel's phone rang. He answered. It was Noah's school. His son had been waiting in the office. Daniel's face changed. He had forgotten the pickup time. Again. He closed his eyes. Not again. He rushed to the school. Noah was sitting alone with his backpack beside him. When Daniel entered, Noah stood. "Are you working?" Daniel stopped. "No. You're always working." Daniel crouched in front of him. "I know." Noah looked at him. "Did you quit?" "Yes." "Then why are you still working?" Daniel had no answer. Noah picked up his backpack. "I thought quitting meant you'd be here." The words followed Daniel all the way home. That night, he returned to Victoria's office. I need to leave. Victoria looked up. What? I can't do this. She stood. Daniel. No. I quit because my son needed me. Victoria didn't interrupt. Daniel continued. I can't become the same man with a different job title. Victoria slowly sat down. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then she opened a drawer. Inside was a photograph. A young girl stood beside an older man. Victoria. And her father. My father missed almost everything, she said. Daniel looked at her. School plays. Birthdays. Graduations. She touched the photograph. He built the company and lost his family. Daniel said quietly. And you became him. Victoria looked at him. The words hurt because they were true. I don't know how to stop. Daniel sat across from her. Then stop pretending the company is the thing you're supposed to save. Victoria stared at him. What am I supposed to save? People. The next morning, Victoria made a decision. She removed Marcus from his position. But she didn't accuse him publicly. Not yet. They needed proof. Daniel designed a controlled transaction. A fake contract. A carefully hidden financial trail. Only 4 people knew about it. Victoria, Daniel, Evan, and one outside attorney. Within 24 hours, the information appeared in Marcus's private network. Marcus moved. He transferred money. He contacted an overseas account. And the entire transaction was recorded. The evidence was undeniable. But Marcus wasn't finished. He walked into Victoria's office carrying a folder. I know what you're doing. Victoria didn't move. Marcus smiled. You think one transaction proves everything? Daniel stepped into the room. Marcus's smile disappeared. You. Daniel placed a recorder on the table. You were expecting me to disappear. Marcus looked at Victoria. You hired him. Victoria answered. No. She paused. He came back because he chose to. Marcus's face tightened. He opened the folder. Inside were documents designed to implicate Daniel. Then you should know your new investigator has a problem. He threw the papers onto the desk. Daniel looked down. His name was everywhere. False approvals. False signatures. False transfers. Enough to destroy him. For one long moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel smiled. Marcus frowned. You're not angry? Daniel picked up the first document. No. He turned it over. This signature is from before I had access to this system. Marcus's face changed. Daniel placed another document beside it. This vendor didn't exist yet. Another. This employee had already left the company. Victoria looked at Marcus. You built the case too quickly. Marcus stepped backward. Daniel's voice remained calm. You didn't frame me. He looked directly at Marcus. You framed yourself. Security entered the room. Marcus didn't fight. He simply stared at Victoria. You'll lose this company without me. Victoria shook her head. No. She glanced at Daniel. I almost lost it because of people like you. Marcus was escorted away. The investigation that followed lasted 6 months. Millions were recovered. Several executives resigned. Evan accepted responsibility for his part and testified against Marcus. Victoria rebuilt the company's internal structure from the ground up. But Daniel did something unexpected. He refused the enormous salary. Victoria stared at his resignation letter. You're quitting again? Daniel smiled. Not exactly. He placed another document beside it. A proposal. A smaller division. A flexible schedule. Remote work several days a week. And one condition. Daniel would build a program inside the company that allowed employees with children to stop choosing between family and career. Victoria read every page. Then looked up. You wrote this yourself? Every word. She nodded slowly. I'll approve it. Daniel stood. One more thing. Victoria waited. I want Noah involved. Victoria smiled faintly. How? He's 9. He thinks every business problem can be solved with cardboard and tape. Victoria laughed for the first time in weeks. Maybe he's onto something. 3 months later, Daniel stood in a bright school gymnasium beside Noah's science project. It wasn't a cardboard rocket this time. It was a small model of a city. Tiny buildings. Tiny roads. And a miniature office tower in the center. A handwritten sign sat in front of it. A company should be built around people. Victoria stood several feet away, watching. She had arrived without executives, assistants, or security. Just Victoria. When the teacher announced Noah's project had won first place, Daniel clapped harder than anyone. Noah ran toward him. Daniel caught him. But instead of lifting him into the air, he simply held him for a moment. Then Noah whispered, Dad, yeah. Did you fix your job? Daniel looked across the gym. Victoria was watching them. He smiled. No. Noah frowned. I fixed the part that mattered. Later that evening, Daniel returned home and opened the old kitchen drawer where he'd kept the grocery receipt from the night he quit. $37. He had saved it, not because it was valuable, because it reminded him of the man he had almost become. He placed the receipt beside Noah's science fair ribbon. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. Board meeting tomorrow. 8 a.m. Don't be late. Daniel laughed. A second message appeared. And bring Noah's cardboard model. I think the executives need to see it. Daniel looked toward the living room. Noah was asleep on the couch, still wearing his school t-shirt, one hand resting on the small model city. Daniel quietly picked up a blanket and covered him. Then he placed the old receipt back in the drawer. He closed it. And this time, when he walked away from it, he didn't look back.